5 U.S. banks have been fined $26 billion for what the government says are abusive lending practices. This means the banks will have to reduce loans for around 1 million homeowners across 49 states. Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, Citigroup and Ally Financial will also have to compensate victims of improper foreclosure. In the last hour, U.S. President Barack Obama explained all the terms of the settlement.
Under the terms of this settlement, America's biggest banks that were rescued by taxpayer dollars, will be required to right these wrongs. And that means more than just paying a fee. These banks will put billions of dollars towards relief for families across the nation. They'll provide refinancing for borrowers that are stuck in high interest rate mortgages. They'll reduce loans for families who owe more on their homes than they're worth. And they will deliver some measure of justice for families that have already been victims of abusive practices. All told, this isn't just good for these families, it's good for their neighborhoods, it's good for their communities, and it's good for our economy.
Our correspondent Patty Culhane has been listening to the speech made by President Obama, and we heard some of it there, Patty. A major settlement involving some of the top American banks. President Obama sounds quite optimistic. Will it do the trick, though? Will we see more regulation as a result?
You know, most experts say if you really look at the size of the housing problem in the United States, its effect on the overall economy, that this is really a very small token, that it's not going to change the overall dynamic. And just to give you some sense of exactly why they're saying that, you know, the president was quick to highlight the million homeowners that'll basically owe less now because the banks will rework the deals with them. That's 1 million people. That's 1 million homeowners. But there are 12.5 million Americans who are in that position, that they own a home and they paid too much for it, and there's really not much they can do. So if you think about 12.5 million versus 1 million, to the million people, it'll probably seem like a very big settlement. To the 11.5 that are left still without any help, it probably won't seem like a very good deal.
And 49 states, Patty, involved in this settlement, all but one American state, Oklahoma. Why the holdout?
Well, I think they feel like the deal wasn't quite good enough. And I want to point out that the banks are accused of doing a lot of things wrong with this housing bubble that led to the broader recession. This only deals with one tiny aspect of what they did. And it gets a little bit complicated, but in essence, if you fill out paperwork to buy a home in the United States, it's inches deep. Foreclosure paperwork, that much more so. What these banks were doing when the bubble burst and people started missing their mortgage payments is they were rushing through the paperwork. They weren't actually reading it. That turns out it's illegal. Now, what this settlement does is it doesn't absolve the banks of all of the other mistakes. It just simply says when it comes to your paperwork mistakes, you're going to pay $26 billion. The president, very politically speaking, he came out because there's a huge amount of anger in this country that the banks did get a government bailout, that they've returned to record profits, but they feel that they're not actually helping the American people get their own sort of bailout. The president came out a while back and said what these Wall Street types, what these bankers did was immoral, not illegal. Now, that did not sit well with the American public. Going into this election year, we've seen a shift. We've seen the Obama administration start to announce things like this settlement and task forces that will look at actually prosecuting the people who caused this recession. So it is a definite political shift from the president, and I think the reason why we saw him make the unusual appearance fronting this settlement, trying to be the face of it to the American public.
Patty, thanks very much. Patty Culhane in Washington, D.C.